My estranged daughter sent me a parking ticket for a crime I hadn't committed yet. Following her instructions nearly got me killed. The envelope sat on my kitchen table like a ticking bomb. Pink. Cheerful. With my daughter Sarah's handwriting scrawled across the front in that familiar purple ink she'd been using since high school. "Happy birthday, Dad. Open me first," it said, complete with little hearts dotted around the exclamation point. I should have known something was wrong right then. Sarah hadn't remembered my birthday in 3 years running. Not since she'd moved to Seattle with that finance guy who wore $1,000 suits and talked about cryptocurrency like it was the second coming. But here she was, sending me a gift 2 days early, delivered by courier, no less. My coffee had gone cold while I stared at that envelope. 67 years old today, and I was sitting in my empty house in Riverside, California, wondering why my stomach felt like it was full of concrete. The morning sun streamed through windows that Linda used to keep spotless, highlighting dust motes that danced like tiny ghosts of better times. I picked up the envelope, felt its weight, too light for a check, too heavy for just a card. Something rattled inside when I shook it, something small, metallic. My hands, weathered from 30 years of construction work, trembled slightly as I tore open the seal. The first thing I saw was a Hallmark card, generic birthday wishes with a cartoon cake on the front. But it was what tumbled out with the card that made my blood freeze. A parking ticket, yellow carbon paper, official city seal, the works. Made out to my name, my address, my license plate number. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was the violation date, tomorrow's date. The ticket was written for a parking violation that hadn't happened yet. I opened the card with fingers that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. Sarah's handwriting again, but different somehow. Shakier, more urgent. "Dad, I know this looks crazy, but I need you to get this exact parking ticket tomorrow. Park at the meter on 5th Street between Oak and Maple at exactly 2:47 p.m. Let the meter expire. Don't feed it quarters. Don't move your car. This is important. More important than you can possibly imagine. I can't explain everything in a letter, but your life depends on getting this ticket. I love you. Trust me. Sarah." I read it 3 times before the words started making sense, 4 times before I noticed the postscript at the bottom, written in different ink like she'd added it later. "P.S. Happy birthday. I'm sorry I've been such a terrible daughter." The card slipped from my hands and fluttered to the linoleum floor. I stared at the parking ticket, turning it over like it might reveal some hidden message. The officer's signature was illegible, just a scrawl across the bottom. The fine amount. $75. The location, exactly where Sarah had written in her note. My first thought was that this was some kind of elaborate prank. Sarah had always been creative, even as a kid. I remembered the time she'd convinced her 3rd-grade teacher that our family celebrated something called Backwards Day, where we had to wear our clothes inside out and speak in reverse. The teacher had called Linda in a panic, wondering if she'd somehow missed an important cultural tradition. But Sarah was 32 now, a grown woman with a master's degree in marketing and a corner office overlooking Elliott Bay. She didn't have time for elaborate pranks, especially not ones that involved forging official city documents. Because that's what this had to be, right? A forgery? I walked to my computer, the old Dell that Linda had bought me for Christmas 5 years ago, back when she still believed I might want to learn about Facebook and email and all those things that connected people across impossible distances. My fingers hunted and pecked across the keyboard, typing in the city's website address. The parking violation lookup system was easier to navigate than I'd expected. I entered the ticket number, half expecting an error message. Instead, my information populated across the screen. My name, my address, my license plate. And there at the bottom, in official municipal font, violation status pending. Pending, not issued, not paid, pending. I leaned back in Linda's old desk chair, the one that squeaked whenever you shifted your weight. The ticket was real. Somehow, impossibly, my daughter had sent me a real parking ticket for a violation I hadn't committed yet, in a city 300 miles away from where she lived. The phone rang, jolting me out of my confusion. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. 206, Seattle. "Dad?" Sarah's voice, but strained, whispered, like she was afraid someone might overhear. Sarah, what the hell's going on? I got your package and... Did you get the ticket? Yes, I got the ticket. What kind of game are you playing here? How did you even... Jive teet. Dad, listen to me very carefully. This isn't a game. I need you to do exactly what the note says. Park at that meter tomorrow at 2:47 p.m. Let it expire. Get the ticket. Sarah, you're scaring me. What's this about? Are you in some kind of trouble? A long pause. In the background, I could hear traffic. She was outside somewhere, probably on a street corner, looking over her shoulder. I can't explain everything over the phone. But Dad, remember when I was little and you used to tell me that sometimes grown-ups have to do things that don't make sense to keep the people they love safe? I did remember. It was something I'd said when she was 7 and couldn't understand why Linda had to go to the hospital so many times, why Mommy looked so tired and thin and sad, before the cancer took her, before everything changed. Sarah, this is one of those times, Dad. I know it sounds insane. I know you have every reason not to trust me after how I've treated you these past few years, but I need you to trust me now. Your life depends on it. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, listening to the dial tone, feeling like I'd just stepped into someone else's nightmare. Outside my kitchen window, Mrs. Patterson was watering her roses, the same routine she'd followed every morning for the 15 years I'd lived in this house. Everything looked normal. Everything looked exactly the way it had an hour ago, before that pink envelope had arrived and turned my world upside down. But nothing was normal. My daughter, who hadn't called me on my birthday in 3 years, had somehow obtained a parking ticket for a violation I hadn't committed yet. She was whispering on street corners in Seattle, talking about life and death like she was trapped in some kind of spy movie. And she was asking me to trust her after years of treating me like an embarrassing relic from her past. I picked up the parking ticket again, studying every detail. The officer's badge number, the vehicle description that matched my 15-year-old Honda Civic perfectly, the violation code that I didn't understand but which the city's website had recognized instantly. Everything about it was legitimate except for the impossible fact that it existed at all. The smart thing would be to ignore it, to throw the ticket away and chalk this up to some elaborate mistake or mental breakdown on Sarah's part. To go about my day the way I had every day for the past 3 years since Linda died. Coffee and toast for breakfast, a walk around the neighborhood, maybe a trip to Home Depot to buy supplies for projects I'd never finish. But Sarah's voice kept echoing in my head. Your life depends on it. I'd heard that tone before. The last time was in the hospital, when Linda was holding my hand and telling me she needed me to be strong for Sarah. That our daughter was going to need me more than ever, even if she didn't know it yet. Even if she spent the next few years pushing me away because grief made people do terrible things to the people who love them most. I walked to the calendar on my refrigerator, the one with pictures of national parks that Linda had bought the year before she died, back when we were still making plans for retirement trips we'd never take. Tomorrow was circled in red. Not because it was special, but because it was the day I was supposed to get my quarterly blood work done. Dr. Martinez had been nagging me about it for weeks. I could drive to Riverside Medical Center for my appointment and be back home by noon. That would give me plenty of time to make the 3-hour drive to the address on the parking ticket. 5th Street between Oak and Maple. I could be there by 2:47 p.m. if I left right after lunch. The rational part of my brain, the part that had spent 30 years calculating load-bearing requirements and structural integrity, was screaming that this was insane, that parking tickets didn't work this way, that daughters didn't send cryptic warnings through the mail, that normal 67-year-old widowers didn't drop everything to chase after mysteries that made no sense. But the rational part of my brain had been wrong about a lot of things lately. It had been wrong when it told me that Linda's persistent cough was just a cold, wrong when it insisted that Sarah's increasing distance was just a normal part of growing up, wrong when it promised that retirement would be a time of peace and contentment instead of endless, echoing loneliness. Maybe it was time to stop listening to the rational part. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the small suitcase I hadn't used since Linda's funeral. If I was going to do this, if I was going to trust my daughter's impossible warning, then I might as well be prepared to stay overnight. The drive back to Riverside in the dark wasn't something I wanted to attempt anymore, not with my night vision getting worse every year. As I packed, my mind kept circling back to Sarah's voice on the phone. The fear in it, the desperation. Whatever was happening, whatever had prompted her to send me this bizarre birthday gift, it was real to her. Real enough that she was willing to reach out to the father she'd been avoiding for 3 years. Real enough that she was asking me to trust her when she'd given me every reason not to. The parking ticket sat on my dresser, yellow carbon paper catching the afternoon light. $75 for a violation I hadn't committed yet, in a place I had no reason to be, on a day that was supposed to be ordinary. But maybe ordinary was overrated. Maybe after 3 years of ordinary days that blended into each other like watercolors in the rain, it was time for something extraordinary. Even if that something made no sense. Even if it scared me more than I wanted to admit. I zipped up the suitcase and carried it to the front door. Tomorrow, I would drive to a city I'd never visited, to park at a meter I'd never seen, to get a ticket I already had. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally understand why my daughter thought my life depended on it. The next morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes after a sleepless night. I'd spent hours staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from passing headlights sweep across the walls like searchlights, hunting for answers I didn't have. Every time I'd started to drift off, Sarah's voice would jolt me awake. Your life depends on it. By 5 a.m., I'd given up on sleep entirely. I made coffee strong enough to strip paint and sat at my kitchen table with the parking ticket spread out in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. In the harsh fluorescent light, it looked even more impossible than it had yesterday. The paper was too crisp, too official, too real to be fake, but the date stamp made my brain itch every time I looked at it. I'd Googled everything I could think of: parking ticket fraud, municipal corruption, identity theft schemes involving traffic violations. Nothing came close to explaining how someone could generate a legitimate ticket for a future violation. The closest thing I'd found was an article about a computer glitch in Phoenix that had accidentally issued tickets with wrong dates, but those had been corrected within hours and flagged in the system as errors. This wasn't an error. When I'd checked the city website again at 3 in the morning, the status still read pending, like the entire municipal computer system was holding its breath, waiting for me to complete some cosmic transaction. Dr. Martinez's office was a 15-minute drive from my house, tucked into a medical complex that smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. I'd been coming here for routine checkups ever since Linda's oncologist had recommended him, back when we still believed that catching things early made a difference. "Mr. Thompson, right on time as always," said Maria, the receptionist who'd been watching me age in increments over the past 5 years. She handed me the familiar clipboard with forms I could fill out in my sleep. Insurance information unchanged, emergency contact unchanged, current medications unchanged. It was remarkable how much of your life could fit on 2 sides of a single sheet of paper. The blood draw was routine. Quick prick, 3 vials, Band-Aid with cartoon characters that seemed designed to mock the gravity of whatever secrets my plasma might reveal. I was back in my car by 11:30, which gave me 4 hours to make a 3-hour drive to a place I'd never been for reasons I couldn't explain. The Honda started on the second try, same as it had every day for the past 8 years. Linda used to joke that the car was too stubborn to die, that it would keep running on pure spite long after more expensive vehicles had given up. I'd never appreciated the irony until after her funeral, when I realized that spite might be the only thing keeping me running too. The drive north was hypnotic in the way that long stretches of highway can be. Same scenery repeating like a broken record, strip malls and fast food restaurants and billboards advertising services I'd never need. I stopped once for gas and a sandwich that tasted like cardboard, but my hands were shaking too much to eat more than a few bites. By 1:30, I was sitting in my car on a side street 3 blocks from 5th Street, watching the clock on my dashboard tick toward 2:47 p.m. with the slow inevitability of a countdown timer on a bomb. The neighborhood was typical for a small city's downtown core. Brick buildings that had seen better decades, meter parking that cost more per hour than I used to make per day, young professionals in expensive coffee shops, typing on laptops and pretending their lives had meaning. I'd driven past the target location twice, memorizing the layout like I was planning a heist instead of a parking violation. The meter was there, exactly as described, Space number 47 on a block that looked like every other block in every other downtown district in America. Nothing special, nothing that would justify a 3-hour drive, and whatever madness had possessed my daughter to orchestrate this elaborate charade. At 2:40, I drove around the block one final time, looking for parking enforcement officers. The city had those little 3-wheeled vehicles that buzzed around like mechanical wasps, their operators armed with handheld computers and the authority to ruin your day for the price of a nice dinner. I spotted one 2 blocks away, methodically working its way down a row of expired meters. 2:43, time to commit. I pulled into space 47 and fed the meter exactly enough quarters for 4 minutes. The digital display showed 2:47 p.m. as my expiration time, which felt like cosmic confirmation that I was either doing something very right or very wrong. I turned off the engine and sat back to wait. The silence was deafening. No radio, no air conditioning, just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional footstep of pedestrians who had no idea they were witnessing what might be the stupidest decision of my 67 years. Through my windshield, I could see the coffee shop across the street. Young people with their whole lives ahead of them, making plans and falling in love and believing that tomorrow would be better than today. 2:45, 2 minutes. I thought about calling Sarah, but she'd been clear that she couldn't explain everything over the phone. Besides, what would I say? That I was sitting in my car waiting to get a parking ticket like some kind of municipal masochist? That I'd driven 3 hours based on a cryptic note from the daughter who'd spent the last 3 years treating me like an embarrassing family secret? 2:46, 1 minute. My palms were sweating despite the cool afternoon air. This was insane. This was the kind of behavior that landed people in psychiatric holds or adult protective services investigations. Normal people didn't drive across state lines to deliberately violate parking regulations based on mysterious notes from estranged children. 2:47. The meter expired with a small electronic beep that sounded like a death sentence. Nothing happened. Cars drove past, people walked by. The world continued spinning exactly as it had before, indifferent to my small act of rebellion against logic and common sense. I sat there for 5 minutes, then 10, watching for the parking enforcement officer I'd spotted earlier. At 2:57, the 3-wheeled vehicle rounded the corner like a mechanical angel of municipal justice. The officer inside was a woman in her 40s, wearing the kind of uniform that suggested she took her job seriously. She parked behind my car and climbed out with a handheld device that looked like it could launch nuclear missiles or print parking tickets with equal efficiency. I watched in my rearview mirror as she approached my expired meter, scanned the display, and began typing information into her device. License plate number, make and model, violation code. The same information that was already printed on the ticket sitting in my passenger seat, impossible and undeniable. She walked to my driver's side window and tapped on the glass. I rolled it down, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "Sir, your meter's expired. I'm going to have to issue you a citation." "I understand," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "I'm sorry about that. I lost track of time." She studied my face for a moment, and I wondered if she could see the guilt written there. Not guilt over the parking violation, but guilt over the elaborate deception I was participating in. Guilt over trusting my daughter's impossible instructions. Guilt over being exactly where I was supposed to be at exactly the right time for all the wrong reasons. "It happens to everyone," she said, not unkindly. "The fine is $75. You can pay online or mail in the citation." She tore off the carbon copy and handed it to me through the window. Yellow paper, official city seal, violation code that matched the ticket Sarah had sent me perfectly. I stared at it, this impossible duplicate of something that shouldn't have existed, and felt reality shift around me like sand beneath my feet. "Thank you," I said automatically. "Because what else do you say when someone hands you evidence that the universe operates according to rules you don't understand?" She nodded and walked back to her vehicle, already moving on to the next expired meter, the next minor violation in an endless cycle of municipal enforcement. For her, this was just another ticket on another Tuesday afternoon. She had no idea she'd just participated in something that defied every law of causality I'd ever believed in. I sat in my car for another 10 minutes, comparing the 2 tickets side by side. They were identical down to the officer's badge number and the timestamp of the violation. Same paper, same ink, same incomprehensible proof that my daughter had somehow reached across time to orchestrate this moment. My phone buzzed with a text message, Sarah's number. "Did you get it?" I typed back with trembling fingers. "Yes, now what?" The response came immediately. "Go to the Riverside Inn on Main Street, room 237. The door will be unlocked. Wait for me there. Don't tell anyone where you are." The Riverside Inn was a budget motel that had seen better decades, the kind of place where traveling salesmen used to stay when traveling salesmen were still a thing. The lobby smelled like cigarettes and industrial carpet cleaner, and the desk clerk looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Room 237, I said, sliding my credit card across the counter before he could ask. He ran the card without making eye contact and handed me a plastic key card that had been swiped so many times the magnetic strip was nearly worn away. "Checkout's at 11, he mumbled, already turning his attention back to whatever was playing on the small television behind the desk. The elevator wheezed and groaned its way to the second floor like it was powered by pure determination rather than electricity. Room 237 was at the end of a hallway that stretched into shadows, past doors that probably hid stories I didn't want to know. The door was unlocked, just as Sarah had promised. The room was standard motel generic, 2 double beds with comforters that had seen too many washings, a desk bolted to the wall, a television from the previous century mounted in the corner like a technological artifact. But what caught my attention immediately was what sat on the desk. A manila folder, thick with documents, a laptop computer, closed but still warm like someone had been using it recently, and a note in Sarah's handwriting. "Dad, thank you for trusting me. Read everything in the folder before I get there. What you're about to learn will change everything. I'm sorry I waited so long to tell you the truth." I opened the folder with hands that felt disconnected from my body, like I was watching someone else rifle through documents that would explain why my daughter had orchestrated this elaborate parking ticket scheme. The first page was a photograph, black and white, grainy like it had been taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. It showed me walking out of Dr. Martinez's office that morning. Same clothes I was wearing now, same confused expression I'd been carrying around for the past 24 hours. But the timestamp in the corner made my stomach drop. The photo was dated 3 days ago. Someone had been watching me. Someone had known I'd be at the medical center this morning before I'd even decided to make the appointment. The second document was a copy of my medical records. Not the basic information you'd find in a patient portal, but detailed lab results, doctor's notes, even handwritten observations from nurses. Everything from the past 5 years, going back to Linda's diagnosis. My hands shook as I flipped through pages that documented every test, every consultation, every moment of hope and despair we'd shared in sterile examination rooms. But it was the most recent entry that made my blood freeze. Today's date. Dr. Martinez's notes from the blood work I'd had done just hours ago. Results that shouldn't have been available yet, let alone printed and placed in this folder by my daughter who lived 300 miles away. Patient shows elevated markers consistent with aggressive pancreatic adenocarcinoma. Recommend immediate oncology referral. Prognosis without treatment 3 to 6 months. I read it again, then a third time. The words swam on the page like they were written in a foreign language, but their meaning was crystal clear. I was dying, had been dying for months probably, while I sat in my empty house feeling sorry for myself and wondering why Sarah never called. The next document was worse. It was a printout from Dr. Martinez's computer system showing that he'd tried to call me 17 times over the past week. 17 messages I'd never received because I'd been screening my calls, assuming they were telemarketers or scammers or anyone else I didn't want to deal with. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. Each document built on the last, creating a picture of conspiracy and surveillance that stretched back months. Bank records showing unusual activity in my accounts. Credit reports pulled by companies I'd never heard of. Even photographs of my house taken from different angles at different times of day. Someone had been studying me like a lab specimen, documenting every aspect of my routine, my health, my isolation. But who? And why? The answer was in the back of the folder. A business card for something called Meridian Solutions with an address in Seattle. Below it, a contract bearing my daughter's signature and a date from 6 months ago. The header read, Mortality Prediction and Estate Intervention Services. I had to read that twice before it sank in. Someone was paying to predict when I would die, and my daughter had signed a contract with them. The laptop on the desk chimed with an incoming message. I opened it to find an active video chat window. Sarah's face filled the screen, but she looked different than I remembered. Thinner, more tired. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there at Christmas 3 years ago. Dad, I can see you've opened the folder. Sarah, what the hell is this? What is Meridian Solutions? Why do you have my medical records? She looked away from the camera, like she couldn't bear to meet my eyes even through a computer screen. It's complicated, Dad. More complicated than I ever wanted it to be. Try me. I've got nothing but time, apparently. According to this, I held up the medical report. I've got maybe 6 months of it left. But that's not true anymore. That's why we're doing this. That's why I needed you to get that parking ticket. I don't understand. Sarah's image flickered as she adjusted her camera. Behind her, I could see what looked like an office space. Fluorescent lighting, cubicles, the kind of corporate environment where people made spreadsheets about other people's lives. Trough. Dad, what would you say if I told you that some companies can predict when people are going to die? Not just statistical probabilities, but actual dates, specific times and locations. I'd say that sounds like science fiction. It's not. It's data analysis on a scale you can't imagine. Every transaction you make, every website you visit, every phone call you screen. It all goes into algorithms that can predict human behavior with 97% accuracy. I stared at her through the screen, trying to process what she was saying. You're telling me someone can predict death? Not just predict it, Dad. Influence it. Companies like Meridian Solutions specialize in what they call outcome optimization. They identify people who are going to die soon, then find ways to profit from that knowledge. That's insane. Is it? Think about it. If you knew exactly when and how someone was going to die, what could you do with that information? Insurance fraud, estate manipulation, identity theft. The possibilities are endless. My mouth felt dry as cotton. And you work for these people? Sarah's face crumpled. I didn't know what they were when I started. I thought I was just doing market research, analyzing consumer patterns for targeted advertising. But the deeper I got into their systems, the more I realized what they were really doing. Which is what exactly? They target people like you, Dad, isolated elderly individuals with no close family connections, significant assets, and predictable behavioral patterns. They use their algorithms to identify the exact moment when intervention will be most effective. Intervention for what? To accelerate the timeline, to make sure you die exactly when and how their models predict you will. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself, staring at my daughter's face on the screen. You're saying they murder people? Not directly. They create situations, accidents that look natural, medical errors that seem like routine mistakes. They're very good at making it appear like fate. And the parking ticket was supposed to put you in a specific location at a specific time where one of their contractors could arrange an accident. A distracted driver running a red light, a construction accident, something that would look completely random. I felt like I was drowning in information that made no sense. But I got the ticket. I was there at exactly the right time. Why am I still alive? Sarah smiled for the first time since the video call had started. Because I intercepted their contractor. Because instead of their hired killer, you got Officer Martinez, who's been working with me for the past 3 months to expose what Meridian Solutions is doing. Officer Martinez? The parking enforcement officer who gave you the ticket. She's an undercover investigator with the State Attorney General's office. We've been building a case against Meridian Solutions, but we needed evidence of their actual operations. We needed to catch them in the act. I stared at the parking ticket sitting on the motel room desk. So this whole thing was a setup? The biggest sting operation in California history. Meridian Solutions has been responsible for over 200 deaths in the past 5 years. Elderly people who died in convenient accidents right before their estates were liquidated by shell companies connected to the organization. And I was supposed to be number 201. You were supposed to be their biggest score yet, Dad. Your life insurance policy, the house, your retirement accounts. They had buyers lined up for everything before you were even supposed to be dead. I sat back in the uncomfortable motel chair, trying to absorb the magnitude of what Sarah was telling me. Someone had been planning to kill me for money I didn't even know I had. My daughter had been working undercover to expose them, and the parking ticket that had seemed so impossible was actually evidence in a criminal investigation. Sarah, I need you to slow down. Start from the beginning. How did you find out about any of this? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Remember when I moved to Seattle? When I told you I got that job in marketing? With the finance company. There was no finance company, Dad. I was recruited by the FBI. They'd been investigating a network of companies that specialized in what they called mortality arbitrage, using predictive analytics to profit from death. But you never told me you were working for the FBI. I couldn't. The investigation was too sensitive, and they needed me to maintain my cover. But when your name showed up on Meridian's target list 6 months ago, I knew I had to do something. So you've been lying to me for 3 years. Sarah's face crumpled. I've been protecting you for 3 years. Do you have any idea how hard it's been to stay away? To let you think I didn't care about you when all I wanted was to keep you safe? I thought about the birthday cards that never came, the phone calls that went unreturned, the growing certainty that my daughter had simply moved on from her old life and forgotten about the man who'd raised her. You could have told me something. I couldn't risk it. These people are incredibly sophisticated. They monitor everything, phone calls, emails, social media activity. If they detected any change in our communication patterns, they would have known something was wrong. So instead you let me think you hated me. I let you think whatever kept you alive. The laptop chimed with another message. Sarah glanced at something off screen, and her expression changed. Dad, I need you to listen very carefully. The operation isn't over yet. We've got evidence of their planning, but we need to catch them attempting to cover their tracks. What does that mean? It means you're still in danger. Meridian Solutions knows their plan failed. They know you're supposed to be dead right now, and they're going to send someone to finish the job. How do you know that? Because I'm watching their communications in real time. They've got a cleanup crew en route to your location. Professional killers who specialize in making problems disappear. My hands went cold. How long do I have? Maybe 20 minutes, maybe less. I stood up from the desk so quickly the chair fell over backward. What am I supposed to do? Call the police? The local police can't help you. Half of them are probably on Meridian's payroll. But there's a federal task force waiting for my signal. We just need you to stay alive long enough for them to get into position. How am I supposed to do that? Sarah's image on the screen was breaking up, pixelating like a bad internet connection. Dad, you need to get out of that room right now. Don't take the elevator. Don't go to the parking lot. There's a fire exit at the end of the hallway. Take the stairs down to the basement level and wait for me there. Wait for you? I thought you were in Seattle. I've been in the lobby for the past hour, Dad. I couldn't risk coming up until I knew you were ready to hear the truth. The screen went black. I was alone in a motel room with documents that proved someone wanted to kill me for my life insurance money, and my daughter, who I thought hated me, was apparently an undercover federal agent trying to save my life. I grabbed the manila folder and headed for the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest. In the hallway, everything looked exactly as it had when I'd arrived. Same flickering fluorescent lights, same stained carpet, same doors hiding whatever secrets budget motels accumulated over the decades. But now every shadow looked like it might be concealing a killer. Every sound echoed like footsteps getting closer. I found the fire exit at the end of the hall and pushed through the heavy metal door. The stairwell was concrete and steel, built for function rather than comfort. My footsteps echoed off the walls as I descended, each step taking me further from the safety of routine and deeper into a world where parking tickets could save your life, and daughters you thought had abandoned you turned out to be federal agents. At the basement level, I pushed through another door and found myself in a storage area filled with industrial equipment and the kind of maintenance supplies that kept cheap motels functioning. The air smelled like cleaning chemicals and machine oil. And there, sitting on a stack of cardboard boxes like she'd been waiting for me her whole life, was Sarah. She looked exactly like the little girl who used to wait for me to come home from construction sites, Except now she was wearing a bulletproof vest under a navy jacket and had a badge clipped to her belt. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, more professional, but her eyes were the same green as her mother's had been. Dad. She stood up from the boxes, and for a moment we just stared at each other across 20 feet of concrete and 3 years of silence. I'm so sorry. Sarah, I don't understand any of this. You're really FBI? She nodded, pulling out her credentials. Special Agent Sarah Thompson, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division. The photo was recent, showing the same tired eyes I'd seen on the laptop screen upstairs. I've been undercover for 4 years. The Seattle job, the finance boyfriend, moving away from home. All of it was cover for this operation. I looked at the badge, then at my daughter, trying to reconcile the federal agent standing in front of me with the marketing executive I thought she'd become. The boyfriend who talks about cryptocurrency? Agent Marcus Webb. He's been my partner on this case since the beginning. She must have seen something in my expression because she quickly added, "Professional partner, Dad. We're not actually together. That was just part of the cover story." Relief flooded through me, which seemed insane given that someone was apparently trying to kill me. But for 3 years, I'd imagined my daughter building a life with someone who represented everything I wasn't. Rich, educated, sophisticated. Someone who could give her the kind of future a retired construction worker never could. How much of it was real? The job, the apartment, the reason you stopped calling? Sarah's face crumpled. None of it was real, Dad. The hardest part of this whole operation wasn't infiltrating a criminal organization or gathering evidence or maintaining my cover identity. It was staying away from you. Do you know how many times I wanted to pick up the phone? How many birthdays I sat in my apartment crying because I couldn't send you a card? Then why didn't you? Because they were watching everything. Meridian Solutions had been monitoring your communications for months before I even knew you were a target. Every phone call, every email, every piece of mail. They had software that could detect changes in communication patterns. If I'd suddenly started calling you regularly after 2 years of minimal contact, they would have known something was wrong. I sat down on a nearby crate, the weight of revelation making my legs unsteady. So you sacrificed our relationship to save my life. I sacrificed our relationship to save your life and gather enough evidence to shut down an organization that's killed hundreds of people. Her voice broke slightly. But that doesn't mean it didn't destroy me, Dad. Every day for 3 years I've been dying a little bit inside, knowing you thought I'd abandon you. The sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere above us. Heavy boots on concrete stairs. Sarah's hand immediately went to her weapon, and she motioned for me to get behind a large industrial boiler. "How many?" I whispered. She pressed a finger to her lips and pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. After a few seconds, she showed me the screen. "Backup is 2 minutes out. We just need to stay hidden until they get here." The footsteps got closer. Multiple sets now, moving methodically through the basement level like they knew exactly where to look. Professional searchers, not random hotel guests who'd gotten lost looking for the ice machine. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it and her face went pale. "Dad, they've got the building surrounded. This wasn't just a cleanup crew. This was a full tactical response." "What does that mean?" "It means Meridian Solutions has more resources than we thought. It means they're willing to risk exposure to eliminate you as a witness." "Witness to what? I didn't see anything. I just got a parking ticket." "You got a parking ticket that proves their entire system is compromised. That ticket represents evidence of conspiracy, attempted murder, and federal racketeering. It's worth millions of dollars in prevented claims and avoided prosecution." The footsteps stopped. Somewhere in the mechanical maze of the basement, someone was listening, waiting, hunting. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing off the concrete walls, like a bass drum announcing our location to anyone who cared to listen. Sarah pulled out what looked like a military radio and spoke in a whisper so quiet I could barely hear her. "Control, this is Agent Thompson. Package is secure, but we've got multiple hostiles on site. Request immediate tactical support." The response crackled back through static. "Thompson, tactical is still 3 minutes out. Can you maintain position?" "Negative, we're compromised. They know we're here." A new voice cut through the radio chatter, older, authoritative. "Agent Thompson, this is Director Hayes. What's your assessment?" Hayes. The same last name as mine, which seemed like too much of a coincidence given everything else that had happened today. Sarah noticed my expression and nodded grimly. My handler, she mouthed silently. Uncle David. Uncle David. My brother, who I hadn't spoken to in 15 years after a fight about Linda's funeral arrangements. The brother who'd moved to Washington, D.C. to work for the government and never looked back. The brother who'd apparently been orchestrating my daughter's career without bothering to mention it to me. Control, package is mobile, moving to secondary extraction point. Sarah grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a different door, one marked with warnings about authorized personnel only. Behind us, the footsteps resumed, closer now, more urgent. They knew we were moving. The door opened onto a tunnel that connected the motel to an adjacent building. Service corridors that most guests never knew existed, designed for maintenance workers and emergency access. Sarah had clearly studied the building plans in advance because she moved through the narrow space with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. Sarah, I need to know something. The medical report in that folder, the cancer diagnosis. Is that real? She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Dad, we can talk about that later. Right now, we need to focus on getting you somewhere safe. Is it real? The blood work showed some abnormal markers, but Dr. Martinez wanted to run more tests before making any definitive diagnosis. That's why he was trying to call you. The report in the folder was falsified by Meridian Solutions to justify their timeline. So I might not be dying. You might not be dying of cancer, but you're definitely going to die if we don't get out of this tunnel in the next 60 seconds. The passage opened into the basement of what looked like an office building, cleaner than the motel, with modern lighting and the kind of corporate sterility that suggested someone paid attention to maintenance. Sarah led me to a freight elevator and pressed the button for the 3rd floor. There's a federal safe house in this building. We've been using it as a staging area for the operation. Once we get there, you'll be protected until we can take down the rest of Meridian's network. The elevator rose slowly, each floor marker lighting up like a countdown to safety. But when the doors opened on the 3rd floor, we weren't greeted by federal agents in tactical gear. Instead, a man in an expensive suit was waiting for us, pointing a gun at my daughter's chest. Agent Thompson, so good to finally meet you in person. Sarah's hand froze halfway to her weapon. Mr. Carver, please don't do anything heroic. I'd hate for your father to witness your death before his own. Carver looked like every corporate executive who'd ever fired me from a job I needed. Mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of confident smile that came from never having to worry about money or consequences. His gun was small, expensive-looking, the kind of a weapon that whispered instead of shouting. You must be Dennis Thompson. I feel like I know you already. We've been studying your habits for quite some time. Mr. Carver is the CEO of Meridian Solutions, Sarah said quietly. He's also a former CIA operative who specializes in making problems disappear. Former CIA, current entrepreneur. The skills transfer beautifully to the private sector. Carver gestured with his gun toward a conference room visible through glass walls. Shall we have a conversation about your daughter's betrayal? We walked slowly across the office space, past cubicles and copy machines that looked exactly like any other corporate environment. Nothing suggested that this was the headquarters of an organization that murdered people for profit. No skulls or crossed bones, no obvious signs of criminal enterprise, just fluorescent lighting and motivational posters about teamwork and excellence. The conference room had a view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Normal people going about their normal lives, unaware that 3 floors above them, a father and daughter were being held at gunpoint by someone who treated death like a spreadsheet calculation. Please, sit. Carver kept his weapon trained on Sarah while we took seats at a polished conference table. I have to admit, Agent Thompson, your infiltration of our organization was impressive. 4 years of perfect cover, gaining access to our most sensitive operations. If it weren't for your personal connection to one of our targets, we never would have detected you. You didn't detect me, I revealed myself. To save Daddy's life. How touching. Carver's smile never wavered. Do you know what your daughter's betrayal is going to cost us, Mr. Thompson? Not just your life insurance payout, but the entire West Coast operation. 17 targets will have to abort, nearly $40 million in projected revenue. I found my voice. You're talking about murdering 17 people like it's a business transaction. It is a business transaction. Death is the most predictable human behavior, Mr. Thompson. Everyone does it eventually. We simply optimize the timing for maximum financial benefit. That's insane. That's capitalism. We identify inefficiencies in the mortality marketplace and correct them. Elderly people with significant assets but no meaningful family connections represent tremendous waste. They're going to die anyway, leaving their wealth to distant relatives or charitable organizations that won't maximize its utility. We simply accelerate the timeline and redirect the assets to more productive uses. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Productive uses like offshore accounts and shell companies, like job creation and economic stimulus. The money we've redirected over the past 5 years has funded 3 major real estate developments, a renewable energy startup, and a medical research foundation. We're saving more lives than we're taking. You're murdering innocent people. We're harvesting resources from individuals who are no longer contributing to society. It's actually quite humanitarian when you consider the broader implications. I stared at this man who spoke about murder like he was discussing quarterly earnings reports. How many people have you killed? Personally, none. I don't get my hands dirty with operational details, but our organization has successfully optimized over 200 mortality events in the past 5 years. Each one carefully planned, perfectly executed, completely undetectable. Until now. Carver's smile flickered for the first time. Until your daughter decided that family loyalty was more important than professional integrity. A disappointing choice, really. Agent Thompson had tremendous potential in our organization. You offered her a job? We offered her a partnership, 20% of gross revenues from West Coast operations. She would have been a millionaire within 2 years. I looked at Sarah, who was staring at the conference table like she couldn't bear to meet my eyes. You could have been rich. I could have been complicit in mass murder. Semantics, Carver said dismissively. The result would have been the same either way. These people were going to die regardless of our intervention. We simply ensured their death served a greater purpose. What greater purpose? Efficiency, Mr. Thompson. Resource optimization. The elimination of waste from the economic system. He checked his watch like he had another appointment after our murder. Speaking of efficiency, I'm afraid we need to conclude this conversation. My associates will be here shortly to clean up this unfortunate situation. The federal task force is already in the building, Sarah said. No, Agent Thompson, they're not. The federal task force received a credible bomb threat at their staging location 20 minutes ago. They're currently evacuating a 6-block radius while our bomb disposal experts conduct a very thorough search for a device that doesn't exist. My daughter's face went pale. You compromised federal communications. We compromised federal communications, local law enforcement, and emergency services. The beauty of predictive analytics, Agent Thompson, is that it applies to everyone. Even federal agents follow patterns that can be anticipated and exploited. The sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway outside the conference room. Not the tactical boots we'd heard in the motel basement, but dress shoes on polished floors. Professional killers who looked like accountants, probably. The kind of people who could walk through a corporate office building without attracting attention. Sarah's hand moved slowly toward her weapon. Carver noticed immediately. I wouldn't recommend that, Agent Thompson. The men approaching this room are former Special Forces operators with extensive combat experience. Drawing your weapon would simply accelerate your father's death. What do you want? What I've always wanted, a clean resolution to an unfortunate problem. Your father dies in what appears to be a random crime. Robbery gone wrong, perhaps. You die attempting to protect him. 2 tragic victims of urban violence. And the evidence we've gathered? Disappears along with the agents who gathered it. Meridian Solutions will express appropriate shock and concern about the loss of federal personnel in the line of duty. We'll even make a donation to the FBI Memorial Fund. 3 men in business suits entered the conference room. They looked exactly like the kind of middle management executives you'd see in any corporate office, except for the weapons they carried with the casual competence of people who killed for a living. Gentlemen, Carver stood and straightened his tie. Please escort our guests to the secondary location. Make it look convincing, but ensure there's no possibility of survival." One of the men nodded and approached our table. "Mr. Thompson, Agent Thompson, please stand up slowly and keep your hands visible." I looked at my daughter, who was staring at me with an expression I recognized from her childhood. The same look she'd had when she was 7 years old and afraid of the dark, when she'd climb into bed with Linda and me during thunderstorms. Fear mixed with trust, terror combined with absolute faith that somehow her father would make everything okay. But I was 67 years old, unarmed, and facing professional killers who treated murder like a quarterly performance metric. I couldn't fight them. I couldn't outrun them. I couldn't negotiate with them. But maybe I could outsmart them. "Mr. Carver," I said, standing up slowly as instructed, "before your associates kill us, I'd like to know something. How did you find out Sarah was undercover?" "Professional curiosity, Mr. Thompson?" "Personal curiosity. I'd like to understand how my daughter's cover was blown before I die." Carver glanced at his watch again, but seemed willing to indulge a condemned man's final question. "Agent Thompson made a critical error 6 months ago. She accessed your medical records through official FBI channels, ostensibly for background verification purposes, but she accessed them 17 times over a 3-week period, which suggested personal rather than professional interest." Sarah's face went white. "The system logs. Every federal database query is monitored and analyzed by our algorithms. When we detected unusual interest in one of our targets from a federal agent, we began investigating the agent herself. Imagine our surprise when we discovered that Agent Sarah Thompson was actually Sarah Thompson, daughter of Dennis Thompson, target number 8 Fiwaruyan in our West Coast operation. So you've known for 6 months that she was my daughter. We've known for 6 months that she was emotionally compromised. We've been feeding her false information ever since, allowing her to believe she was conducting a successful infiltration while actually documenting her activities for our own purposes." I felt the blood drain from my face. The evidence she's been gathering has been carefully curated by our organization. Every document, every communication, every piece of supposed proof of our criminal activities was designed to lead her exactly where we wanted her to go. "Which is where?" Carver smiled. "To this room, at this time, with you. The perfect scenario for eliminating both a compromised federal agent and her inconvenient target in a single operation." Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. "The parking ticket, Brawley, was genuine, Agent Thompson. We really were planning to kill your father at that location at that time. But when we realized you'd discovered our plan, we decided to use your rescue attempt as an opportunity to eliminate you both. You wanted us here. We needed you here. Your father's death had to look accidental, but your death needed to look like something else entirely. A federal agent killed in the line of duty while investigating financial crimes. Very tragic, very heroic, very final." One of the suited men stepped forward. "Mr. Carver, we should proceed. The longer we delay, the greater the risk of complications." "Of course." Carver straightened his cuffs like he was preparing for a board meeting instead of a double homicide. "Gentlemen, please escort our guests to the vehicle. Try to make their final moments as comfortable as possible." The man closest to me reached for my arm. As his fingers closed around my elbow, I did something I hadn't done since my construction days, when workplace safety meant watching out for each other instead of relying on corporate policies. I grabbed a coffee mug from the conference table and smashed it against the side of his head as hard as I could. The ceramic shattered. The man stumbled backward, blood streaming down his face, and in that moment of confusion, Sarah drew her weapon and dove behind the conference table. "Federal agent, drop your weapons!" Gunfire erupted in the conference room like the world's most violent percussion section. The floor-to-ceiling windows spiderwebbed with bullet holes. The conference table splintered under automatic weapon fire. Carver dove behind his chair, no longer looking like a calm corporate executive. I rolled under the table next to Sarah, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. "What do we do now?" "We stay alive until backup arrives." I thought backup was dealing with a fake bomb threat. That was the official backup. I called in some unofficial help before we came up here. "What kind of unofficial help?" Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled for the first time since this nightmare had started. "The kind that doesn't follow federal protocols. The conference room door exploded inward. But instead of more suited killers, 3 men in tactical gear stormed through the opening. Real tactical gear, not the corporate assassin variety. Military-grade weapons, body armor, and the kind of coordinated movement that suggested extensive combat experience. The gunfight lasted maybe 30 seconds. When the smoke cleared, Carver's 3 associates were down, and the man himself was sitting in the corner with his hands zip-tied behind his back, looking considerably less composed than he had during his murder monologue. The lead tactical officer removed his helmet, revealing a face I recognized but hadn't seen in 15 years. Older, grayer, with new scars and the kind of weathered confidence that came from surviving situations most people only saw in movies. "Hello, Dennis." My brother David looked exactly like I remembered, except for the federal badge hanging from his neck and the automatic weapon in his hands. "Sarah called in a favor. Turns out having the deputy director of the FBI as your handler comes with certain advantages." I stared at him, trying to process the fact that my brother was apparently Sarah's boss, had been orchestrating her undercover operation, and had just led a tactical assault team into a corporate office building to save my life. "You're the deputy director of the FBI?" "I'm the deputy director of the FBI who's been trying to shut down Meridian Solutions for 5 years. Your daughter volunteered for the most dangerous undercover assignment in bureau history to protect you." "And you let her?" "I tried to stop her, but she's as stubborn as her father." David looked around the destroyed conference room. "Though I have to admit her methods are effective." Sarah emerged from behind the conference table, holstering her weapon. "Dad, there's something else you need to know about the medical report." My stomach dropped. "What about it?" "Dr. Martinez did find some abnormal markers in your blood work, but they're not cancer markers." "What are they?" "Poison markers. Someone's been slowly poisoning you for months, probably through your water supply or food delivery. The symptoms would have mimicked pancreatic cancer until it was too late to detect the real cause." I sat down heavily in one of the few conference chairs that hadn't been destroyed by gunfire. "Someone's been poisoning me?" "Meridian Solutions' preferred method for targets who live alone. Slow-acting toxins that create symptoms consistent with terminal illness. By the time the target seeks medical attention, they're too sick to survive treatment, and the cause of death appears natural." "But I'm not dying." "With proper treatment, the toxins can be neutralized. You'll be fine, Dad." David was coordinating with his tactical team, speaking into a radio headset about evidence collection and suspect transport. But he paused long enough to look at me with an expression I remembered from our childhood. "Dennis, I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually, for the fight we had after Linda's funeral, for not staying in touch, for not telling you about Sarah's real job, for putting both of you in danger with this operation." "You put Sarah in danger to save my life?" "I put Sarah in danger because she demanded to be put in danger. When we identified you as a Meridian Solutions target, she volunteered for the undercover assignment before I'd even finished explaining the situation." I looked at my daughter, who was checking her weapon and trying to pretend she wasn't listening to our conversation. "Why would you risk your life for someone who thought you hated him?" Sarah looked up from her gun with tears in her eyes. "Because you're my father, Dad. Because you raised me to do the right thing even when it's difficult. Because you taught me that family means never giving up on the people you love, even when they give you every reason to. I never gave you any reason to give up on me." "No, but I gave you plenty of reasons to give up on me. 3 years of reasons." David's radio crackled with updates from the tactical team. "Sir, building is secure. We've got 17 federal agents in custody, all carrying Meridian Solutions identification. Looks like they've been impersonating law enforcement for months." "The fake bomb threat?" "Was called in by Meridian operatives posing as federal agents. Real federal agents never received any threat notification. They were standing by at the original staging location, wondering why they hadn't received orders to proceed." I shook my head, trying to understand the scope of the conspiracy we'd uncovered. "How many people are involved in this?" "Hundreds," David said. "Meridian Solutions is just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about a network of companies that specialize in different aspects of mortality arbitrage, insurance fraud, estate manipulation, identity theft, medical fraud. It's a billion-dollar industry. And now? D4. Now we roll up the entire network. Thanks to the evidence your daughter gathered and the confession we just recorded from Mr. Carver, We have enough to shut down operations in 12 states. Carver was being led away in handcuffs by 2 of David's agents. As he passed our table, he looked at me with the same cold calculation he'd shown throughout our conversation. "This isn't over, Mr. Thompson. There are others. Other organizations, other targets, other agents who won't be as sentimental as your daughter." "Maybe," Sarah said, stepping between Carver and me. "But they'll have to go through the FBI to get to him. And trust me, we take threats against federal witnesses very seriously." After Carver was removed from the conference room, I sat alone with my daughter and brother for the first time in 15 years. The silence was heavy with unspoken apologies and explanations that seemed inadequate for everything that had happened. "So what now?" I asked finally. "Now you go into protective custody while we prosecute the case," David said. "It could take months to round up all the co-conspirators. And after that?" Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "After that, Dad, maybe we could try having a normal relationship. No more undercover operations, no more fake estrangement, no more lies about why I can't come home for Christmas. I'd like that." "Me too." David stood up and walked to the shattered windows, looking out at the city where normal people were going about their normal lives, unaware that they'd just been protected from an organization that viewed their deaths as business opportunities. "Dennis, there's one more thing you should know about the parking ticket." "What about it?" "You can probably get out of paying the fine, federal evidence and all that." For the first time in 3 days, I laughed, actually laughed, deep and genuine and surprised by the sound of my own joy echoing off the bullet-scarred walls of a corporate conference room where I'd almost been murdered by accountants. "David, after everything that's happened, I think I'll just pay the $75. "Why?" I looked at the parking ticket, still clutched in my hand through everything that had happened. Yellow carbon paper that had somehow saved my life and exposed a criminal conspiracy and reunited me with a daughter I thought I'd lost forever, because it's the best $75 I've ever spent.